Dove, a real pleasure to meet you. Where are you based? Where are you?
Well, it's lovely to be here, Jeff. Thank you. Right now, I'm in Hawaii on the island of Maui.
It's one of the places I've never been, and
What?
no, I know. It's just that and New Zealand, two places I've always wanted to go. I never quite got there, but never mind. Have you been there your whole life? Were you born there, or how did you get to?
I've had a few evolutions here. I lived here in 1985 before I went to Australia. Then I lived here in 1990 before I went back to the mainland, to Santa Barbara. And then I've lived here almost 7 years now. I love to be in the ocean, probably like you. I like to be out in nature, interacting with the wildlife. And even though I was doing a lot of creative conservation work in Santa Barbara, I missed being in the water, like with underneath the water. You know, some people love boating. I love being, where it's a different world. It's a different world, and there's nothing, quite like it. But the cool thing, when you mention Hawaii and New Zealand, they're related because the New Zealanders, the Maoris, their ancestors are Hawaiians, so Polynesians. So there's a lot of similar words, a lot of similar practices with the elders. The kahunas are known as the Hawaiian elders. See, I love indigenous cultures. So I mix my dolphin work with indigenous cultures and modern day living.
When I emailed you, I just asked if there was anything in particular you would like to talk about other than what I was going to ask you. And your answer was yes. Marine and planetary conservation is my life. Can you expand on that a little bit for us?
Well, I guess, when you love animals and you love the planet, it's hard not to incorporate conservation in that. And so wherever we're at, whether we use photography, writing, even cooking, even the way we eat, our diet, storytelling, I think in any, wherever someone's at in their life, they can do acts of love. They can do acts of compassion. They can do outreach that makes a difference. Because, doing dolphin research for most of my life, I started when I was a child. And really from a dolphin epiphany, it was almost like it chose me. I wasn't going, I'm going to do, it wasn't like the name thing about me wanting to change my name. It was like me in a really volatile home life where it was unpredictable violence. And so my solstice was nature and animals. And I remember, and my studies. So I read all the time books, just escapism, right? To go into someone else's world. And I went with my mother. I would tag along. There's four of us kids, but I would go to the City College Library. I was 14, going on 15. While my mother was in class, I'd just be in the library going through all these books. Well, I was up on the third level, and Roger Payne's Songs of the Humpback Whale. Yeah. So 1977, I'm listening to those with the headphone, the old fashioned cassette tape, and something unlocked in me. And I call it now I understand it science wise, but back then I didn't understand it because we have three brains. Most people just only talk about the thinking brain and the feeling brain, our logical and our creative brain. But we also have an ancient brain, and we actually make a lot of our decisions from the ancient part. People get very defensive. Case in point, I know I'm backtracking a little bit, but say you go up to someone and they're smoking in a non-smoking area. There's a big sign right behind them. And that happens a lot here in Hawaii because everyone wants to smoke here. And during the last 6 years, I've really uncovered a lot of questions I had about interspecies communication with dolphins and relationships to humans and how to bridge that. And the part about the ancient brain is the ancient memory of smoking is actually sacred. With indigenous cultures, we did that as an act of peace, as an act of connection. We shared the peace pipe. It was a sharing of breath. Nowadays, you take it to modern day. So this is coming from our ancient brain. We're super protective of the memories in our ancient part. So when you go up to someone and say, did you realize, I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, like closes up my throat. You're smoking and non-smoking. Could you go, maybe over there, please? They'll get pissed off. They'll get defensive, and who are you, Hallie telling me what to do? It's like a sign right there. It's just you're affecting everyone around us. We're waiting for the bus. And I realize it's because the sacred, connection of breath that's what they're defending. And it comes from our ancient memories. So what happened in that floor, over 40 years ago was that one humpback whale song unlocked something in my ancient brain where I felt like I was accepted for who I was, loved, connected. And then it was just like, I found every book I could find on interspecies communication with dolphins and whales. And I ended up reading all of John Lilly's books, within like a couple weeks, and coming out to my parents out of my room and saying, I'm going to do interspecies communication with dolphins with my life. They were just like, who is this crazy child that we have? But it was just something that felt right to me. It felt like home. And because I was in, something that was I wanted to find kind of my own truths about what is love, what is our relationship to life. I have since then had conversations with my dad, who was the violent one in our house, right? Like, why did he hit us? And, I've gone past the whole forgiveness thing. But, it's amazing how animal communications and can really help us with our people problems, help us in our relationships, because we're part of the animal kingdom. And I think when I talk about doing marine and ocean conservation for planetary care, it's about having planetary peace. My dolphin work is almost Zen physics. If you, talk to the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama today, he's all about the cognitive sciences and the actual science of physics and how we're related to the universe, how we're related to each other, and really our philosophy, the way we see the world. See, I think there's two ways of seeing it, at least two ways. The SEE way of seeing the world, or SEA. And when you do the arts, like music, or photography, or filmmaking, or storytelling, or cooking, or gardening, we get to see differently, dimensionally, the way the ocean is about life, the way the ocean takes care of us. We're all, it's not a coincidence that we're born to match our planet. To me, that's a divine connection, divine creation. When we're a baby, the way we're born exactly like a dolphin is in the aquatic womb. And then our constitution, water to body mass, 71 to 29% water to body mass. I just think that's amazing. And then our breath is like an ocean wave. It's courtesy of the ocean. Our blood moves like the ocean. And then we have saltwater tears that we share with a lot of animals. I know, I get so excited about this work because I feel like it can help so many people. I mean, it's helped me but I see it as helping kind of our planet, not only survive, but thrive. Just the interconnectivity of it all.
Yeah, I just love your enthusiasm. I mean, there is so much bad happening out there, and it's a constant struggle to try and preserve and conserve and make things right. And to be able to keep up enthusiasm like you're showing is it takes a lot of strength. It's admirable. Absolutely, I love it.
Well, I mean, thank you for even doing these interviews, because see, storytelling, that's the beautiful thing. All these people say, oh, storytelling is the first form of communication and it's the oldest. And there's actually one notch more, which is picture talking, what animals do, what you're doing with your art. We learned picture talking before we learned the verbal words. And that's why I love when you talk with indigenous cultures like Native Americans or Aboriginal Australians or the Maoris or the Hawaiians, they talk about language. But before language came along, it was picture talking. We conveyed something by drawing it or, creating something that was visual, like a picture. And I saw your interview with Jet, the photographer, the wildlife photographer. And he talked about that dolphin story about, trying to get the perfect dolphin photo. And, it was like he finally gave up, right? And said, I surrender. And then all of a sudden, out of the 3 dolphins, one came over and said, is this what you want? I'm right here, right for you, right? Take a picture, get your camera. I'm waiting. And what he was doing was picture talking with the dolphin. It's something that we do naturally, but most people do it unconsciously. When I talk about like my dolphin work in the cognitive science, I'm wanting to bring it forward so it's a conscious thing. Like people get all scared about invisible energies, or even like me, I've been cautious about sharing that Dove story because it talks about an invisible energy, an invisible dimension of like God talking with me, right? Like when St. Francis, talked with the animals, people thought, oh, that's like he was pushed out of like the groups that he was really kind of a part of. I know, I guess so excited. And then like I just had a thing. So back to Jet's story about that. The conscious part is this saying that we picture talk and we do that naturally. It's not something that we have to force. It's like when he stopped trying and just like allowed him to say, this is my request to you. I would really like a picture. Then the dolphin, responded because
True. It's absolutely true. It's I find communication, the best communications, either with people or other species, is without any sort of spoken word at all. It's and when you talk about or people hear about, oh, we're learning to communicate with dolphins, in the back of their minds are saying, oh, we'll have a conversation. It's not about that. It's about feelings, it's about presence, it's about awareness. And so, some of the best interactions I have with people is when we don't say a word. And it's the same when you go underwater. If whether you're with a dolphin, a whale, or a goby, whatever, something small, you communicate silently with your body language, with the way that your whole being presents itself. And that is just so exciting to experience. I can't think of a better experience in these worlds than to actually communicate in that way with other species. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, so you understand. I think when you devote your life doing the arts and doing arts that actually talk, like how they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, when I was talking about the invisible energies, we live in an invisible universe because gravity You and I are both sitting because of an invisible energy. We're not floating about, even though that would be quite lovely. You know, we get to do that when we're underneath the ocean. But, you know, gravity is an invisible energy. So is the electromagnetic field that surrounds our planet. And so we're really a mini-me version of our planet. We have this water to body mass, but that changes as we get older. And you know what we start to lose when we get older? Guess.
Tell me.
Buoyancy. Buoyancy. The water ratio of us. So I'm trying, I guess in my work, I want to bring the buoyancy back in people's lives. You know, that childlike innocence, the levity, let's be more like water. And let's talk about how water is so a part of us, in our cells, in our breath, in our blood, in our tears, in our communication. You know, this form of communication, it's called what? Telecommunication, right? Sending wireless messages over vast distances. This technology we've used for 50 years, whereas dolphins and whales have used this technology, how we're talking over Zoom, for 50 million years. So when you just take that, so when people talk about, is a dolphin intelligent? Or, you know, what happened when I was 14 going on 15 with all those books I read that John Lilly wrote was, he's doing it backwards. Why teach the dolphin our language instead of learning their language back to us? It was just like, it seemed so apparent, but it was like, you know, so in career day, you know, I'm in junior high, you know, and then they're going, what do you want to do? Interspecies communication with dolphins. Oh, captivity? No, wild. Because I read about John putting electrodes up to dolphins' brains to monitor them. All this captivity, you know, takes away the very essence of what makes a dolphin, which is wild, free, community, family, you know, feeling the ocean waves and currents, you know, swimming 40, 50 miles a day. Freedom, what we all want in our lives. You know, so when we think we have to control, a few messages that I get while working with the animal kingdom and dolphins is really, it's no longer about control. It's about consciousness. And we are to learn how to put the human, the word humane, back into the word humanity. Because in our very own language, we have human in the word humanity. You know, humane, being humane. What does that mean to each of our lives? I think each of us have to ask ourselves and say, you know, it's like me going under the water. It's not just with dolphins. You know, like spending a month trying to take a picture of a blowfish, because I had never seen one that was white with white polka dots. And I thought, oh, how cool is this, right? So they're very timid. You know, I was like, you can trust me. In my GoPro, you know, I use the basic of equipment. The GoPro is on a pole, so it looks like a spear gun, right? So even though blowfish are poisonous to eat unless you know how to prepare them, people still spearfish them. And this was that whole experience of taking a month for me to get closer and closer, because they live in their home, like their territory, right? And then eventually, I remember the last kind of week of this month, the blowfish, because there's no zoom on a GoPro. At least there wasn't the GoPro 3 that I was using, or 4 that I was using, you know, and there was no like screen. So you have to, I remember you asking Jet about what makes, you know, doing photography under the water so lovely. And it's really just, for me, experiencing the moment, like the interaction, and then hopefully capturing something. So I kind of use it as a, like recording the moment, but I don't want to lose the moment of the connection that I have with the blowfish. So I'm kind of just like, you know, it's like balancing between both worlds. It ended up happening during this last week of the month that I got super close to the blowfish, and the eyes and the expression. It was almost like you could see eyelashes on the eyes. It was so sweet. I took the photos. Then a couple days later, I went back to the same spot to swim, because it's kind of like in My Octopus Teacher. You've seen the movie, right? The recent one. That's been my life, you know, but I've never had someone documenting my life with different animals. Like I've had those experiences with a certain sea turtle, like Bruno, you know, and then I've had, you know, or a lily, like different, you know, that. But with this blowfish, what ended up happening was a couple days later, I'm swimming, and part of when I swim, I'm bringing in plastics, discarded fishing line, you know, bottles, hair, you know, ties, goggles, glasses, everything I find in the ocean floor. You know, so I'm snorkeling around and I see a little glint that doesn't look like, you know, meant to be there. So I'm like tying all these things onto my bathers while I'm swimming along. So I see this long green fishing line, and I'm like, oh, bloody hell. Like, to me, it's like an interruption of like my fun time in the water. So I follow this green line. It was horrific. At the end of this green line was my blowfish friend. And the expression on the blowfish, it was like he had the same expression of what we would look like if we were fighting for our life. And I kept on diving down to try to get the hook out of its mouth, right? And then the fisherman was on the sand beach. Like, he really shouldn't even been fishing there, but there's no one regulating, because it's actually a sanctuary. You know, it's supposed to be deemed a sanctuary area, but, you know, he's fishing there. And so I kept on diving down to try to get the hook out. And then the fisherman noticed that I was like in line with his fishing. And he, underneath the water, I watched this blowfish being pulled. And I swam into shore, and I came out of the water like crying, but you couldn't tell because I was wet, right? And I walk right up to the young guy who's the fisherman, and I'm like, you just, you know, killed my friend. And he goes, well, you didn't have to bite my line. And I was like, this was his home. And he didn't throw it back in, knowing that he wasn't even edible. And I think that's the kind of mentality about control versus consciousness. The beautiful thing, I posted that photo. That's why how art can be artivism, like activism, but you use your art. Because I posted that photo about that relationship. You know, took me a month to gain this blowfish trust. And during that last week of its life, he got caught by a fisherman who didn't even need him for food. I mean, we have groceries full of food to choose from. You didn't really have to destroy someone's life. And I think that's the difference of, I haven't eaten fish since that day, of watching that fish have the same emotions we have on our face. You know, I've been a vegetarian most of my life, you know, since I was 14, 15. But then I changed to veganism because I watched that fish have the same emotions of what we would go through. And then someone sent me this beautiful BBC documentary about a male blowfish, how he spends a week not eating because he's trying to attract a female. How many men do that for female humans, you know? And he makes this beautiful mandala in the sand. And I'm like, is that not a thinking fish? You know, someone who designs mandala with their breath, blowing this beautiful mandala, bringing shells, you know, so the female will find it attractive to come and lay her eggs in the middle of the mandala. I mean, that's how films can move us. That's how our photography can change people's perspectives. So, you know, it really uplifted me to see that documentary about how intelligent a blowfish is. And most people brush aside fish of not having a brain to have feelings. Well, you know, when we think when I talk about we have three brains, you know, a thinking brain, a feeling brain, maybe they have more of a feeling brain. Then we activate ours to use.
I think you only have to spend a little time underwater on a reef anywhere, and it becomes so obvious. I mean, it always amazes me how people, they go on their dive holidays or etc., and they kind of tick off this list of species that they've seen, and they've never spent more than a few seconds with each. And the amount of things they're missing just by what you're saying, you know, you miss all the behavior, you miss the interactions with fish with each other, you can see feeling, you can see apprehension, you can see fear, you can see pain, and you can see contentment as well in a lot of fish. You know, it's there in those aspects. They really are no different from us at all. And I always find that's again one of the huge pleasures of this communication thing to other species. I find it stunning. Just pulling up on a couple of things that you covered there, with eating fish and stuff. I mean, likewise, I had a similar experience. Something just turned me, and I thought, oh my God, what am I doing? I can't eat seafood at all anymore. But much of our natural world and everything is being lost to the consumer, because simply people, they don't really investigate or know where their food is coming from, and how it gets there. And then, as a slight extension of that, people who do know and care are labelled in the media as environmentalists. And when they say environmentalists, they also slightly bracket like they're slightly weird people. You know? And in truth, they're the only people, we are the only people that actually care about the planet we're living on. And yet when they talk about industrial fishing, logging, mining, it's with a little more respect, you know. And this is how the media react to this, and I find it quite extraordinary how those things are representative of how most people feel. I don't know how to get environmentalism to be a popular culture within the masses. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I talk a little bit about that in my book, Dolphin Talk, and it's about a value system. Say, for instance, you book a hotel to come here with your family to Hawaii, right? And you want an ocean view versus a view over the garage. Do you think that's more money? Normally it is. That price point is deemed higher. You want to buy some real estate. Oh, beachfront, ocean view, you know, thousands of dollars more. Do we put that same set of values on what the ocean gives us? Like, I once found, you know, it's like people ask me, can you find this for me? Because for whatever reason, my magnetite in my cells is attracted to treasures. So I found 2 men's wedding rings buried in the ocean, both the same size. And I was like, thank you, God, for my husband to be. But one engraved said, I love you more. And it felt like the ocean saying to me, I love you more than you can repay, more that you can ever give back, more than you can ever imagine. And I felt like that was a reminder to me that it's how we value things. And unless more, you know, companies come up, I mean, being in conservation, caring about the planet for so long, and now people are using it as like jargons, or like I'm an advocate now What, because you put your name onto something? You know, have you even worked on it? You know, it's like the blood, sweat, and tears in something. There's something to actually live it. Most of my life, I haven't documented. You know, I haven't had a camera with me. You know, a lot of things I discovered from empirical evidence of just experiencing it. Having wild dolphins show me things in the ocean, throwing out trash. A dolphin, and I said, how can I help you? You know, because they talk telepathic and communication, right? Phone. This is how they're talking. And a dolphin came up to me and threw a piece of trash, plastic trash. This was in the 80s. So we've been polluting the ocean for a long time. You know, it's thankfully more people are waking up. You know, I was thinking about 4 or 5 movies people could watch. What people have, you know, it's almost like I talk about dolphins and our DNA coding, because there are 64 codes in us that relate to a lot of things in life. Sunflowers, there's like a sacred geometry of so many things in life. The curl of a wave, the curl of a seahorse. You know, that I actually went to a school in New Mexico, that was taught by Drumvalo, the same guy who coined the flower of life. So this was during kind of my time that I was just doing interspecies communication, researching. But I was in the mountains of Colorado working with John Denver in the WinStar symposiums with the Russian exchange program. Well, before that happened, I had been studying water birthing with Igor Tchaikovsky. And he did, you know, early research about humans being birthed in water with dolphins. So I was doing all of that as like extra credit in college. You know, like, will you go in this isolation chamber so I can, you know, and then I went to Australia and I was like a manager of a flotation tank center for a year. So imagine floating for a year. You know, the one beautiful thing that John Lilly did was he designed the flotation tank to give people an opportunity to float, to be free of gravity, to be free of sound, external noises, and then your brain, like 45 minutes in a tank of 800 pounds of Epsom salts and 15 inches of water, and the water temperature. Have you floated?
Nope. No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
You floated when you're in the ocean, but not.
Of course, yes. I've certainly been weightless, and it's fantastic. But I've never been in a flotation tank.
Yeah, so
in the
your
dark,
time.
I assume.
Yes and no. I mean, those rooms you can slide open the.
Okay.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be pitch dark, because I remember I brought my mother into one of those tanks. She's like talking in the other tank going, honey, can I leave this? I'm like, do whatever makes you happy. You know, she's like, it's stinging. Yeah, there's a lot of Epsom salts in there. Don't open your eyes, you know, because you're like buoyant and like the line of water is like here. So you're not supposed to be having a chat while you're floating, you know, and she's, you know, so I was taking someone who doesn't even know kind of that world. My mom doesn't really like the ocean. You know, she used to take us to the beach, but she's not like, you know, her version of camping is being inside like, you know, a maxi van, you know, with the fold out bed, you know, like she's just not like that. But inside a tank is why people love scuba diving so much, why people love free diving so much. When you spend time floating, your brain waves change to the meditative brain waves. You're allowed, toxins that we keep in our cells and our body get pulled out with the salt water. You know, it's really therapeutic. People would come into this center that myself and 2 other ladies, we managed these 2 different centers in Sydney, Australia. I used to take a ferry across to one of them. It was so much fun. We used to have all night floats where we'd float all night, which is kind of intense because it's changing the way that you think. It's unlocking more of your DNA. because what ends up happening is it changes the neural pathways of how thoughts and feelings get transmitted. See, every day our brain and our heart has 40,000 neurons going back and forth. People go, oh, my heart's not connected to my brain. Hello, science. You talk to a cardiologist, they'll say your heart and your brain is constantly in communication with the 40,000 neurons each day. Whether you want to be conscious about it or not, that is your choice. But the thing with floating is 45 minutes in that state is equal to an 8-hour sleep. People would come out. It was flight attendants, business people, people that were all different types, walks of life. They came in looking one way, they would leave looking a completely different way. I mean, like melt. It was like this peace. That's probably like a piece, almost like an acceptance of like, this is life, right here, right now. And I think that's how you feel when you come out of the water, like after a scuba dive or after snorkeling, or you just feel like, life is good.
Yeah, you do. You're absolutely right. Until that moment, have you ever dived in a dry suit and stuff in cold water?
I not in a dry. I got certified off the Great Barrier Reef in Australia back in the 80s.
Okay. Well, the only reason I mention it is because it is so heavy, and there is so much weight, and it's so that all that pleasure that I feel right up until my feet touch the sand or the rocks, and then it becomes pain, or I have to walk up the beach or whatever with all this huge amount of gear, and for about half an hour it just takes away all that loveliness that I just experienced in the water. But
you got to bring a cart down.
It doesn't quite work like that.
I know, but it's almost like a metaphor to how we live our lives. When you think about the weight that we carry, see, our brain, that's the thing about invisible energies. There's, cold and hot nuclear, there's the electromagnetic, there's gravity, and our brain is constantly balancing ourselves with gravity. So when we get tired, it's because we're always trying to balance that invisible energy of us living on land. I've worked with a lot of challenged children and adults, and to me, it's like working with people. Get also crazy about when I say like a wild animal, but a wild animal to me is someone that's in tune with their environment. A wild animal means that they're in harmony. And when I've worked with challenged children, they don't have all the protective filters that so-called normal people have, and able to take in information, sounds, light, activity. And it gets overwhelming, like to them on different levels. Or like if you've worked with someone who's blind, like I used to work with this horse riding program in Nashville, Tennessee called Saddle Up. And I used to take this one blind boy out around sunset, and then he goes, "Can you describe the way the sunset looks?" And so as I described it, you know what he did? Just held his head up so he could feel the sun touching him, moving, changing, of all the ways. And it was so beautiful to actually watch him experience the sunset. Because when people's, I think that back to your question about how can people shift, it's the small stories that we share through our films, like My Octopus Teacher or Seaspiracy or The Cove, that people can see how interconnected we are, that there's not a big gap between how, oh, I brought in something from outside, oh, for you. That has to do with our DNA.
Oh, really? My goodness.
Oh. Yes, a leaf.
Okay.
Now these are abundant everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Trees, bushes, even in the ocean, there's lots of leaves. This is the gift from dolphins and whales, for us to realize that we are exactly like a leaf, our DNA. We're a transmitter and receiver of light and sound. The sole purpose of a leaf is what? Regeneration. Regeneration. To go back into the soil and regenerate our planet. How are we doing that in our own lives? Like, we treat leaves like they're pests, leaf blowers. I mean, I hear leaf blowers almost every day of the week because we want to control nature. We take away the leaf's sole purpose. Now, if our DNA is exactly like a leaf, transmitter and receiver of light and sound, our sole purpose is to regenerate, just like so many other animals. Like a sea turtle is a peaceful recycler. A whale is a recycler out in the ocean, bringing nutrients from the ground. There's so many animals. The tiniest coral reefs, corals, are animals. Their sole purpose is to regenerate our planet, give us oxygen. Like people, I think the thing is, that's why I think what I'm trying to use is my art to connect the dots, like how Aboriginals, Australians, they paint all those dots because it's all of our connections, all of our song lines through the planet to each other, our channels of communication, to really remind us. It's almost like a guide of remembering how connected we are. It's, it's a really simple thing. It's a really, like, when I got this kind of reminder, it was like, how do I describe dolphins and whales with one leaf? And, when you look up a leaf, it basically says that. And when I look at the way humanity is treating leaves, they're not allowing leaves to go back into the soil, into regeneration. And I think it's like in Hawaii here, they have trucks that go by that say clean energy, gas. Fracking's not clean energy. Why poison the very water that gives us life? Why dump and pump, 50 to 200 forms of chemicals into water that goes into our rivers, our lakes?
Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
So I just think that everyone can start at home being an activist, just from the products that you buy. Like, are they biodegradable? Everything returns back to the sea, including you and me, right? We all become part of the cycle of regeneration. So there's a beautiful movie called Kiss the Ground. And there's a line in there that says, keep poop in the loop. Whereas, when you think about cows out in the pasture, mushrooms grow in their patties. And mushrooms are like, if you've ever watched that Fantastic Fungi movie, it's another documentary. It shows how the fungi are like the circuit boards across our planet, helping to regenerate, helping to give new life, helping to communicate. So all of us are communicating. It's not just humans who are communicating, it's the animal kingdom, it's nature. And I think that's exciting to think, wow, everyone's talking. It's like, it's whether, am I going to listen to that? It's almost like we decide what we're going to tune into. But the beautiful thing about music, like why when I lived in Nashville, Tennessee, and I worked a lot in the film industry, music became the sea to me, because music helps us with the same thing that nature does. It helps unlock DNA. When we do heart-forward dynamics, things that we love, gardening, cooking, making love, doing the arts, photography, writing, all that stuff, it stimulates, it touches those circuits that are coding of our DNA. Because most scientists will say, we're only using 20 of our 64 codes. We don't really need the other 44. And I just say, no, we do. Those 44 codes are just in a sleepless slumber until we wake them up. That's why people go, I couldn't express something until I felt that song, like why that song moved me so much, or why people watch a movie, because it's unlocking the DNA that they can't get to. That part of that coding in them that they know that movie will hold the key. That's why it's so powerful using the arts for artism. I can't even say the word. Artfinism, activism with art. And
absolutely, golly.
Yeah.
Dove, it's been. I'm gonna have to wrap it there. I have to say, I've talked to you, or you've talked to me longer than anybody else, and it's like the time has gone really short. I just love listening to you. Thank you again for taking time to talk to us. It's been brilliant.
It's been lovely being here, and it's exciting to share stories, and I hope that you make a trip either here or New Zealand. I'm working on a new project called Born Aquatic, and I'm pitching it to the Discovery and the Explorer Club.
Good luck
pipeline.
with that.
Yeah, because I want to kind of blend the stuff of the connections with indigenous cultures, animals, dolphins and whales, those people, and modern day. So hopefully that will come to fruition. And then I'll let you know, and you can come to New Zealand to do some filming. Have you filmed the sperm whales before we say goodbye? Have you?
Yes. Yes, I have. I've done quite a few sperm whales. Yeah. One of my most exciting dives was with sperm whales.
Where?
Off Sulawesi.
Where's that?
Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So next time we have a talk, you can tell me all about the sperm whales, because they're the ancient keepers. They hold like our records of the universe. People think why they're like this. They say, oh, they're sleeping. No, they're meditating, because they have a lot of magnetite in their blubber. It's like they're balancing our planet. So.
Oh my gosh, there's so much still to learn.
Well, and I'm not doing it as I'm doing it from a science point of view of being I'm always skeptical. I want to find the science to support my work. I don't want to be seen as a new ager. I'm very practical about things. If someone, shows me something like a dragonfly or a dolphin or any of that stuff, that whole concept of dolphins being afraid of sharks. I was out swimming with a family of bottlenose. 2 sharks were with them the entire time. It's misconceptions. Anyway.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And you take great care now.
You too. Aloha.
Right. Bye for now.